He's dying for you but won't say it. How to recognize it, Carl Jung. There is something deeply revealing about the moment a woman begins to discover her inner strength. It is not a loud event, nor a grand gesture. Rather, it is a silent revolution, a transformation that occurs in the intimacy of the soul, like a sprout emerging in the darkness of the earth before it touches the light. This transformation often begins unexpectedly, with a breakup, a betrayal, a loss, or simply an existential exhaustion that can no longer be ignored. Something inside her says, "Enough! Enough of pretending everything is fine. Enough of maintaining connections that drain her. Enough of betraying herself to fit in." In that instant, almost imperceptible to the outside world, a spark is lit. It is not yet a flame, but it is enough to initiate a process of returning to herself. A return that is not always linear or comfortable, because in coming back to herself, the woman meets everything she has hidden for years: her repressed anger, her silenced desires, her disconnected body, her violated boundaries. It is an uncomfortable mirror, but a profoundly necessary one. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the journey toward the wholeness of being. And for many women, that journey begins with the urgent need to heal their sexual wound. This is not solely about physical trauma, but about the psychological, emotional, and symbolic trauma of having been raised in a culture that sexualizes, shames, fragments, and silences. The sexual wound in women is not only personal, it is also ancestral. It is written in her story, in her body, in her cellular memory. And when she begins to touch that wound, something trembles. She can no longer see her life, her pleasure, or her intimacy the same way. This awakening, though uncomfortable, is also deeply liberating because it means facing for the first time what could previously only be sensed: that her body is not foreign territory, that her desire is not shameful, and that her voice has the right to be loud. And so begins a courageous process, that of inhabiting herself with presence, inhabiting her body as a temple, not a battleground, inhabiting her energy as a source, not a threat, and inhabiting her story, not to repeat it, but to transform it. And it is here where conflict often arises, because when a woman begins to remember herself, the world around her trembles. Her closest relationships, family, partner, and friends, may resist this new version of her. Some will feel threatened, others confused, because she no longer asks permission to feel. She no longer apologizes for her intensity. She no longer dims her light to avoid discomfort. This does not make her selfish. It makes her conscious, because now she understands that she cannot heal in an environment that makes her sick, and that she cannot bloom in a space where she must wither to please others. The paradox, however, is that this empowerment may come with a deep loneliness, not because there are no people around her, but because, for the first time, she is facing herself without masks, and in that emotional nakedness, everything is seen with a painful but transformative clarity. What she once tolerated now hurts. What she once justified now unsettles. What she once ignored now demands attention. But also, in that fertile solitude, a powerful seed begins to sprout. The seed of her new identity. An identity that no longer depends on external validation, that no longer molds itself to others' expectations. It is the identity of a woman who has seen herself whole with her shadow and her light, and has chosen to embrace herself unconditionally. That woman is not perfect, but she is whole. She doesn't know everything, but she trusts her voice. She doesn't have all the answers, but she walks with the certainty that her truth deserves to be lived. From the perspective of depth psychology, this process is seen as an alchemical act. The transformation of pain into awareness, chaos into wisdom, and fragmentation into unity. It is not an easy path, but it is one of the most sacred a woman can take, because it means deprogramming what was learned, shedding what was inherited, and beginning to build from the soul. It is a renunciation of comfort in order to embrace what is true. So if you find yourself at a moment in your life when everything seems to be falling apart, if you feel you can no longer go on as before, but still don't know where to go, maybe you're not lost, maybe you're awakening. An awakening, though confusing at first, is the greatest act of self-love you can offer yourself. It's not about becoming someone else, but about returning to yourself, to the person you were before the pain, before the demands, before the forgetting. Because when a woman reconnects with herself, she doesn't just heal herself, she heals her lineage, her descendants, and her surroundings. And in that silent yet powerful act, a new world begins to take shape. One where love is not about sacrifice, but about connection. Where the body is not a battlefield, but a garden. And where the wound is no longer a prison, but a doorway. And on the other side of that door waits the life she always sensed, but never dared to claim as her own. This is where the second sign often appears, subtle yet heartbreaking, that he is starting to fall in love, but cannot hold it emotionally. He seeks you out with luminous, almost ravenous intensity, and then disappears, without warning, without clear explanation. It's as if one day he wakes up and surrenders to your presence, full of gestures, words, and attentions that make you feel seen, desired, and important. And the next day, the same man vanishes as if none of it had any real meaning. A message goes unanswered, a call never comes, and a gaze once warm now turns distant. The contrast is not only confusing, it's painful, because just when you begin to open up to meet his affection, to lower your guard, he builds a wall. Then come the questions. What changed? Where did the promising connection break? Did I do something wrong? But rarely is the answer found outside. He didn't leave because he stopped feeling. He left because he felt too much. And in feeling, his fear surfaced. That primal fear of falling into pain again, of repeating past stories, and of exposing himself without knowing if he'll get hurt. His mind reacts like a fortress under attack. It raises defenses, builds excuses, and even sabotages itself with thoughts like, "This is moving too fast. I'm not ready. I don't want to hurt you." And yet these phrases don't reveal the truth. They reveal his fear. This is where many women stumble without realizing it. They take his contradictions as disinterest, as if everything he gave at the start was a lie. But it wasn't. Those contradictions don't speak of a lack of feelings. They speak of an internal war. He is torn between the part of him that longs to surrender and the part that screams that if he does, he'll break. The man is not always aware of this battle. From the outside, he may seem manipulative, inconsistent, and selfish, but often he is not. He is not manipulating out of coldness, but out of inner confusion. He's not playing with you. He's wrestling with himself. When you're with a man who is falling in love and afraid, everything in him vibrates with ambiguity. He wants you close, but he doesn't know how to hold you. He yearns for you, but is afraid of the power you hold over his emotional world. His way of protecting himself is to disconnect at times, to become elusive, and to rationalize his feelings. And you naturally feel the urge to demand clarity, to ask, why does he dim when he seems so ablaze? How could you not? How could you not seek answers when your heart becomes vulnerable to someone who offered you a special place and then seems to withdraw it without warning? But here lies a silent truth. Pressuring a man in conflict pushes him further away, not because he doesn't care, but because he feels even more overwhelmed. He doesn't need you to save him, But he does need you not to abandon him emotionally. He doesn't need you to erase yourself, but he does need you to stay anchored in yourself, to not dissolve in his chaos, but to witness it with inner strength. For him, love means pain, not because of you, not because you hurt him, but because love forces him to lower his defenses. And that hurts, like removing armor he has worn his entire life. So what can you do? Look beyond his words. Listen beyond his silences. Language can lie, but energy cannot. Observe if, despite his disappearances, he always comes back. If he can't help but seek you, even while saying he's not ready. If his gestures betray him. If his gaze reveals what his mouth won't say. If amid the chaos there is one constant, his desire to be near you, even if he doesn't know how. It's not about waiting forever for him to grow emotionally, but rather about learning to read the deeper signs that love is there, even if it cannot yet emerge without a struggle. One of those signs is, without a doubt, his body. Because there is one thing no man can fully hide: his body language. Even if his words are evasive, even if his speech is full of doubt, his body speaks to you. It speaks with the orientation of his torso, with the way he seeks your gaze when he thinks you're not watching, and with the seemingly accidental touches he repeats unconsciously. Carl Jung made it clear. The unconscious expresses itself not only in dreams, but also in gestures, in posture, and in micro-expressions. It's there, in that silent theater of the body, that true feelings are often revealed. So pay attention. What does his body do when you're near? Does he lean toward you even without touching you? Does he watch you silently, with a gaze that holds more than words ever could? Do his pupils dilate when you look at him? Does his breathing change? Does his voice soften? These are tiny details, almost imperceptible, but deeply revealing. They are not seduction tactics. They are not rehearsed gestures. They are unconscious cracks, openings through which what he doesn't dare to say begins to leak out. And there's more nervousness, that clumsy discomfort that appears when you're close, playing with his hands, touching his neck, laughing at the wrong moments, and not knowing what to do with his body. That restlessness is not indifference. It's emotional impact. The body, when touched by love, reacts truthfully because the unconscious doesn't know how to lie. Also, observe him during silence. He stays near you even if he says nothing. He looks for you when you're speaking with others, and he says goodbye slowly, as if his body doesn't want to leave. All of these are signs, gestures, that say what he doesn't dare to admit, what you make him feel, and that disarms him, because the body speaks even when the soul is silent. And if you know how to listen to that deep language, you can see beyond the contradictions and beyond the emotional ups and downs, and you can understand that his love is not a broken promise. It's a truth he's still learning how to live. And here, we reach a crucial point. Subtle, but deeply important. Do not try to confront him with rational arguments. Don't bombard him with direct questions. And don't try to make him articulate what he still doesn't know how to name. When a man is lost in his own emotional labyrinth, pressuring him with logic doesn't free him. It drives him deeper into hiding, not because he doesn't want to answer you, but because he doesn't even have the answers for himself yet. Love, when lived in fear, doesn't enter through the mind. It seeps through the cracks of the body, through the places where reason can't reach, and through the involuntary gestures that cannot be controlled. And this is where you hold a silent and powerful gift to observe and to listen, not to his words, but to his energy, not to what he says, but to what he does. His body becomes his only truthful translator. And from that attentive listening, without judgment, without the need to force definitions, you can ask yourself, what do you need? Because it's one thing to accompany someone through the process of figuring out their emotions, and quite another to remain in a place where your own clarity is suffocated while waiting for theirs. The essential truth, remember, is that the body doesn't lie. As Jung said, the soul often speaks through the body, long before it finds the right words. And when the soul falls in love in secret, when the heart begins to beat at a different frequency, even if the mind resists, the first thing that changes is not speech, but behavior. The small gestures, the tiny actions, the everyday decisions that, one after another, begin to form an emotional map far more revealing than any verbal confession. This is where the fourth, subtle sign appears, that this man, despite his confusion, is beginning to fall in love with you. And he does it spontaneously, simply through those little things he himself may not consider important. But that reflects an emotional connection growing inside him, without him even realizing it. He doesn't express it with grand declarations. But if you're out late, he checks if you got home safely. If you're sick, he shows up with something to help. Without you having asked, if he senses you're anxious, he reaches out with a message, a joke, or a small and unexpected gesture. These aren't declarations. They're presences, not strategies, but genuine impulses of protection and closeness. That is love beginning to express itself in the most human form, care. These gestures are immensely valuable because they arise without filters, without calculation, without expectation. They're not meant to seduce or impress. They're the reflection of something growing inside him, a tenderness beginning to take shape before it's fully understood. And that makes them authentic because they come from the soul, not the ego. They are actions that seek no recognition, but reveal more than 1,000 words ever could. You'll also start to notice that, without big announcements, he begins including you in his world. He doesn't formally invite you. He just mentions you to his friends. He shares a song because it reminded him of you. He shows you a photo because something in his day made him think of your laugh. He changes a plan to see you without saying he did it for you. He asks your opinion on things that matter to him, as if your voice had earned a special place within him. These are clear signs that even though his mind is still negotiating with fear, his heart is already moving in a different direction. And it's not about everything being perfect or consistent. There will be silent days, awkwardness, and moments of retreat. But if you learn to read the vibration of those small details, you'll be able to distinguish between a man who's just passing time and one who, though he may not know how to name it yet, is beginning to choose you from a deep place. Because true love rarely arrives with fireworks. Sometimes it comes like this, in the form of a seemingly insignificant gesture, in a change of tone, in a glance that lingers 1 second longer, in a shy question, in a shared memory, in laughter that escapes for no clear reason. And when that happens, the soul has already begun to speak, even if the mouth remains silent. At this point in the process, many women feel deeply confused. They hear the man say firmly that he doesn't want a relationship, that he's not emotionally ready, and that he can't offer more. But then they observe that his actions contradict those words, again and again. And he hasn't left. He's still there, present in the details, in the spontaneous care, in that constant attention that makes no logical sense if he truly wanted to keep his distance. And it is within this apparent contradiction that true emotional wisdom comes into play. Not clinging only to words, but learning to observe the pattern. Because in the soul, actions are always more honest than words. If his gestures are warm, if his actions are consistent, if his presence is sustained over time with tenderness and attention, even when his language is evasive or denying, then there is already real emotional involvement. He may not recognize it yet. He may not know how to name it, but his soul is already involved. From the perspective of depth psychology, this is explained as a dissociation between the ego and the self. The ego, that part of him that responds to duty, control, and what he has learned about how he should act, still resists. But the self, in Jungian terms, the deep core of being where true desires live, has already begun to act, even without the ego's permission. That's why when you see him care for you without seeking recognition, when he shows up for no apparent reason just to know how you are, and when he subtly adjusts his routines to coincide with yours, you're not imagining things. You're witnessing a non-rational expression of love, one that doesn't come from conscious intention, but from an unconscious need for connection. And, paradoxically, even those gestures may be tinged with fear, because in his story, there may have been abandonment, betrayal, or pain that still shapes him today. Maybe he learned that love means risking loss, that surrendering equals suffering. That's why he draws near, but also keeps his distance. He takes care of you, but doesn't acknowledge it as love. He does so much and then downplays it. If you bring it up, if you try to highlight the importance of those acts, he will likely minimize them. It's nothing, he'll say, but you know it is something, because love is not always spoken. Sometimes it's simply done. And when someone cares for you without expecting anything in return, without even realizing they're doing it, that is love in one of its purest forms. As Jung said, what we deny submits to us, and what we accept transforms us. Maybe he is still denying what he feels, but love is already transforming him from within, slowly and beyond his control. However, this transformation is not always bright. And here, we arrive at one of the most confusing and also most painful moments of unconscious love. Just when everything seems to be going better, when the connection deepens, when the gestures begin to speak louder than words, he pulls away. There's no prior argument, no logical explanation, just distance, silence, vague excuses, and coldness where once there was warmth. Naturally, you wonder what you did wrong, but the truth is, you did nothing. The bond didn't break. On the contrary, it became so deep that it touched his wound, and in touching it, it frightened him. In Jung's view, this phenomenon is understood as an intense activation of the shadow, that collection of repressed aspects, traumas, insecurities, and memories that a man has learned to hide, even from himself. True love, the kind that is not built on masks or games, not only brings joy, but it also opens sealed doors, unearths forgotten memories, and awakens emotions that had been put to sleep out of necessity, not choice. And all of that can be too much. When a man begins to truly fall in love, he doesn't always respond with surrender. Sometimes he responds with panic. Panic about feeling, panic about trusting, panic about being vulnerable. Maybe he was wounded in childhood. Maybe he loved and was rejected. Maybe he learned to associate affection with loss. So when you arrive with your tenderness, your presence, your emotional truth, and what you make him feel, he runs. Because he feels more than he can hold. And instead of coming closer to understand it, he pulls away to protect himself. This is what's known as emotional flight, and it's far more common than we think. For someone whose emotional history has been marked by abandonment or instability, love doesn't represent a refuge. It represents danger. It's not perceived as an opportunity, but as a threat. That's why when they start to truly fall in love, the first thing they do is distance themselves. But it's a mistake to interpret that distancing as indifference. In many cases, he doesn't pull away because he's stopped feeling, but because he's feeling too much. and that emotional flood activates old memories he doesn't know how to handle. As Jung said, in these moments, the shadow awakens, the fear of rejection, the feeling of being unworthy of love, and the childhood terror that everything will fall apart once he opens up. And in the face of this, the mind reacts by closing doors. But it's not the heart that wants to leave. It's the wound crying out for protection. The fifth subtle sign that he is falling in love, even if he won't admit it, is precisely this. He begins to avoid you just when the connection is blooming the most. The silence, the confusion, and the withdrawal are not always the end. Sometimes they are simply the expression of a soul that hasn't yet learned how to hold the very love it longs for. And while it's not your responsibility to heal him, understanding this process can help you stop blaming yourself for things that are not in your control and allow you to make decisions from awareness, not from your own wounds. Love, when it touches the most intimate parts of the soul, doesn't only illuminate, it also exposes. It doesn't just reveal the beautiful, but also the fragile, the hidden, and the wounded. That's why, when the man who seems so close suddenly pulls away, don't take it as personal rejection. Don't think he doesn't care anymore, or I did something wrong, or he's leaving me behind. Because sometimes he distances himself precisely because he cares more than he can handle. Because what he feels for you doesn't fit within the framework he's used to protecting himself with. And when the soul overflows, the mind, full of fear, tries to retreat. So, what should you do? The answer isn't to chase him, demand explanations, or manipulate him to stay. Your greatest act of love, for him and for yourself, is to stay grounded in your center, to remind yourself that it is not your job to carry his process. You can offer emotional safety. You can be a loving presence, but you cannot and must not crawl for a love that is not yet ready to stand. Don't sacrifice your emotional well-being while waiting for him to resolve his fears. Because true love isn't built on pursuit or anxious waiting. Real love is born when two people, each from their own journey, are willing to hold emotional intimacy with awareness and responsibility. Jung said that there is no awakening of consciousness without pain. And often that awakening begins with the recognition of fear. So if he pulls away just when he seems closest, if he suddenly becomes distant, or if he begins to avoid you without clear reason, don't read it as lack of love. Read it as a sign of just how deeply you're affecting him. Your presence doesn't only attract him, it also confronts him. And maybe if he manages to face his shadow and chooses not to run from himself anymore, he will return. But he will return changed, more present, more real, and more himself. And if it happens, he will no longer depend on you. Because after the fear, the contradictions, and the unexplained withdrawals, sometimes, and only sometimes, there comes a breaking point. A moment that may be subtle or sudden, gradual or abrupt. It is the moment when the man who resisted what he felt can no longer keep fighting against his inner truth, and he surrenders. Not like someone who has lost a battle, but like someone who has stopped waging war against his own heart. This is the sixth, subtle sign that he is in love and that he finally can't deny it anymore. That change doesn't always come with poetic phrases or eternal promises. Sometimes his surrender is shown in the most powerful way. He stays, he's there, he chooses you. He begins to build with you without needing grand declarations. He no longer makes excuses. He no longer creates unnecessary distance. He opens up with authenticity. He's no longer so afraid to be seen for who he truly is. And even if his words are still clumsy, his energy has changed. He is no longer the man who runs. Now he is someone who wants to stay and learn, even if he's still afraid. From the deep perspective of Carl Jung, this moment represents a key milestone in the inner journey, the integration of the shadow. The man who once projected his fears, who avoided, and who lived in tension between what he felt and what he showed, now begins to accept his emotions as legitimate parts of his being, and in doing so, he regains an inner power that had long been held hostage by fear. He is no longer so afraid of feeling. He no longer needs to hide behind an image of self-sufficiency. For the first time, he can say something like, "I don't promise you perfection, but I want to try. With you, I feel at home even when I tremble inside." These aren't words meant to impress. They are truths that emerge when one stops fighting oneself. And that gesture, the brave surrender to what one feels, is infinitely more valuable than any romantic fantasy, because it doesn't come from idealization, but from emotional labor, from the recognition of fear, and from the conscious decision to stop running. But it's also important to understand this clearly. Not all men reach this point. Many remain on the shore. They get lost in avoidance, in self-deception, in fear of their depth. Only those with the courage to look inward, to touch their wounds, to let their emotional armor fall, only they manage to cross that inner threshold, separating them from authentic love. And when they do, when they truly do, nothing is ever the same. They no longer minimize their affection. They no longer make you doubt your worth. Because now love is no longer a threat to them. It has become an undeniable truth. You, who witnessed his shadows, who knew how to read beyond his contradictory actions, who had the strength not to be misled by every silence, now have a choice before you. You can embrace that now, mature love, or you can choose to keep walking your own path. If you feel that your journey advanced while he lingered in his, what matters most is that you know this, with your soul at peace. If a man finally surrenders to what he feels for you, he does not do it out of weakness. He does it from a strength born from no longer running. To love is not the task of those who feel no fear. To love is the brave act of those who, even with fear in their bones, still choose to stay, to open, to love. And that gesture, so human, so imperfect, so profound, is perhaps the greatest proof that unconscious love has stopped being shadow and has finally become light. When a man stops running and starts staying, it doesn't mean everything becomes easy. On the contrary, the act of staying marks the beginning of a stage as beautiful as it is challenging, the stage of rebuilding. Because to love with awareness after having faced fear is not simply to continue as if nothing happened. It's learning to live with the scars, with the emotional memories that still ache, with the vulnerability that is now no longer denied, but integrated as part of the relationship. The man who has crossed the threshold of his shadow and has chosen to love does so with a new perspective. He no longer hides behind excuses. He no longer acts on reflex or fear. He begins to speak from what he feels, even if he still stumbles over his words. His presence becomes more stable, more consistent, and his care is no longer just an instinctive gesture. It is now a choice that is renewed every day, because true love is never taken for granted. It is built, nourished, and sustained with everyday acts that, although small, are filled with intention and awareness. And you who have also walked this path can feel it. You can sense how the energy that was once erratic, ambivalent, or tense now begins to settle. You no longer have to interpret confusing signals or survive his emotional swings. Now, you see him arrive and stay. You see him share his world with you without fear. You see him listen and want to understand you, not to please you, but to truly be there. In such a relationship, there is no longer a need to hide, to prove oneself, or to compete over who loves more or less. The games of silence and distancing are no longer played. because both know how painful silence can be when used as a shield rather than a space for understanding. Now, the space between you is a space of honesty, where even insecurities have a place, but no longer dictate your actions. Love that has passed through shadow, that has recognized its wounds and chosen not to give up, doesn't seek perfection. It seeks presence, and it is there precisely where true intimacy begins. So if you recognize yourself in this journey as the one who waited, who understood, but also grew along the way, know that your strength wasn't in the patience that endured everything, but in the awareness that chose yourself even while loving. And if you are him, the one who kept running until he no longer could, who kept hiding until it no longer made sense, knows that your vulnerability is not a weakness, but a doorway to a more authentic version of yourself. Because true love doesn't come to complete us, but to open us. Not to make us perfect, but to make us real.